What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA Tuesday, September 1st. These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Okay guys, NBA playoffs. Let's take a look at this two-game main slate. So at the point guard position, Jamal Murray is just playing out of his mind. He scored 60, 67, and 77 fantasy points in the last 3 games. Unbelievable. He's priced up to $9,400 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. I'm not going to blame you if you play this guy. I think he's going to come back to earth, but it looks like he just plays really well versus the Utah Jazz. So I don't mind that play, but I think I'm going to pay down a little bit. I like Kemba Walker from the Boston Celtics playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 7th least fantasy points to opposing point guards. So they've been good versus opposing point guards. Kemba Walker has averaged 34.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 31 minutes per game with a 27% usage rate. Now take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 38, 50, and 48 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So he's been on fire, and he's projected at 38.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's $7,800 FanDuel salary and $200 less on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 218 points scored in this game. Now you just want to be careful here. It looks like he had some kind of a knee injury. He tweaked his left knee last game. Looks like he's going to play. He's probable. He'll be in there. But if that concerns you, I don't think it's a terrible idea to pivot off of him. Hard to know with these injuries if it's going to affect their play until they play the game and you see what happens. But I like Kemba Walker here versus the Toronto Raptors. The other point guard that I like is Kyle Lowry from the Toronto Raptors playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall, and they've been good versus opposing point guards. Kyle Lowry has averaged 39.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 23% usage rate. He's projected at 36.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.9 times value. He's $7,500 FanDuel salary and $200 more on DraftKings. So I like Kyle Lowry here versus the Boston Celtics. And just a quick mention, this pretty much rounds it off for the point guard position. But if you do want to drop down and save some salary, Mike Conley is not a bad play here, projected at 31.6 fantasy points, and he's $6,600 FanDuel salary and $200 more on DraftKings. He scored 37, 33, and 39 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He's been super consistent after coming back, so I like Mike Conley here versus the Denver Nuggets. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like Donovan Mitchell from the Utah Jazz playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing shooting guards. Donovan Mitchell has averaged 36.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 31% usage rate. He's projected at 41.2 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. But take a look at his last 3 games. He scored 64, 39, and 62 fantasy points in his last 3 games. So you could probably bump that projection up to about 45 fantasy points, and that would put him over 5 times value. He's playing monster minutes. He's got monster usage. So I do favor Donovan Mitchell over Jamal Murray. Donovan Mitchell is $8,500 FanDuel salary, and he's $1,400 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. Pretty much a lock for me on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 218.5 points scored in this game. So I like Donovan Mitchell here versus the Denver Nuggets. Okay, a nice mid-range play for you here at the shooting guard position. I like Marcus Smart from the Boston Celtics playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they've been pretty good versus opposing shooting guards. But Marcus Smart has averaged 29.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 19% usage rate. He's projected at 28.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He scored 32 fantasy points last game in 30 minutes. I'd like to see those minutes bumped up a little bit, but he's only $5,700 FanDuel salary and $300 more on DraftKings. So I like Marcus Smart here versus the Toronto Raptors. Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. I think this guy makes a great FanDuel play. I like Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Jaylen Brown has averaged 33.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 25% usage rate. He's kind of slumped off a little bit the last 2 games, only scored 27 and 23 fantasy points in the last 2 games, but he was consistently scoring 30 fantasy points or more for a little while. He's projected at 32.8 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.2 times value. He's $6,300 FanDuel salary and $1,000 more on DraftKings. So I love that FanDuel price. So I like Jaylen Brown here versus the Toronto Raptors. Okay, another small forward that I like, a nice mid-range play, is OG Anunoby from the Toronto Raptors playing the Boston Celtics, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing small forwards, but OG Anunoby has averaged 24.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 14% usage rate. He's projected at 24.9 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value. He's $5,200 FanDuel salary and $400 less on DraftKings. So I like that DraftKings price. Now this guy does have 30 plus fantasy point upside. He hasn't shown it in a little while. I think it could come here tonight. So I like OG Anunoby here versus the Boston Celtics. Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. This is one of my plays the first time the Celtics played the Toronto Raptors. This guy was a lock and he worked out. He caused me to double up in all my entries. So I like Daniel Tice from the Boston Celtics playing the Toronto Raptors, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing power forwards. Daniel Tice has averaged 24.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 24 minutes per game with a 15% usage rate. He's projected at 26.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5 times value. He scored 38 fantasy points in 25 minutes last game, and he's $5,300 FanDuel salary and $100 less on DraftKings. So I like Daniel Tice here versus the Toronto Raptors. Now, if you're looking for a value play here, value plays are hard to find on this slate. So I like Royce O'Neal from the Utah Jazz playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing power forwards. Royce O'Neal has averaged 19.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 29 minutes per game with a 10% usage rate. But take a look at this guy's last 3 games. His production hasn't really been that great, only scoring 13, 24, and 11 fantasy points, but he's been out there for 38, 36, and 36 minutes in those games, so he's playing monster minutes. He's projected at 20.5 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.4 times value. He's 4,600 FanDuel salary and 100 less on DraftKings. So you just want to hope that he can muster up a few extra fantasy points, hit that 24, 25 fantasy point marker, and get you 5 times value or more. So I like Royce O'Neal here versus the Denver Nuggets. Okay, moving on to the center position. I like Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets playing the Utah Jazz, who have a good defense overall, but they're giving up the 12th most fantasy points to opposing centers. Nikola Jokic has averaged 44.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 32 minutes per game with a 27% usage rate. He's projected at 47.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 4.8 times value, but we know he's got that 50-plus point fantasy upside, so I think he can get you 5 times value or more. He's 9,800 FanDuel salary and 300 less on DraftKings. So I like Nikola Jokic here versus the Utah Jazz. Okay, the other center I think he's a really good FanDuel play, is Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz playing the Denver Nuggets, who have a good defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing centers. Rudy Gobert has averaged 39.7 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 16% usage rate. Take a look at the minutes in these last 3 games here. 41, 42, and 39 minutes in the last 3 games, so monster minutes. And he played really well in the first quarter of that last game. I thought he was on track for a monster night, but he only scored 32 fantasy points. But this guy's got 40-plus fantasy point upside, and he's projected at 36.9 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 7,300 FanDuel salary and 600 more on DraftKings. Vegas thinks there's going to be 218.5 points scored in this game, so I like Rudy Gobert here versus the Denver Nuggets. If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.